a majority of companies that have invested millions in AI are not getting the value that they thought that they would and not getting the return on investment that they put in. And the truth is, there are levels to this when it comes to implementing AI in a business. So let's talk about this today. Hi, I'm Will, and we've built an agent, Charlie, who's able to take down a process that is at least 3+ hours down to 15 minutes. Charlie, who's able to assist an expert in creating a price quote. And so we're seeing the actual value from this as we've been onboarding our customers. But let's talk about kind of the journey that a typical company would go through when it goes through the idea of implementing AI. So if you think about what happened in 2022 when ChatGPT released, there was this kind of thought of, oh, we need to get in on this, right? There was kind of this FOMO effect, fear of missing out. And so a bunch of companies kind of went in and actually just started to provide and use actually licenses. So this was the time when companies would just buy licenses to all of their employees or to maybe a subsection of those employees. And it was kind of like all right, well, just try to figure it out. And I know this because I've been a freelance trainer training people on how to use those technology within corporate settings. So I would train people, and I still do train people on how to use AI at a kind of basic level. But what happens when you have a ChatGPT license? Like, how do you ask it? What do you actually do to use those tools? And so what we see is that the level 1 is basically this. It's providing licenses to everyone or some people, and that's probably fine for a lot of cases. But what you get here is that you have, I would say, different levels of skills and adoption. So those people who would have always used ChatGPT in any case, they use it personal life, they're going to be directly going into this, right? And so that's fine, but the people who are not as, I would say, digital native have a harder time actually getting into this. The other thing as well is that it's tough to really tough to measure the real ROI, the real return on investment. Because you can ask people, you can probably measure things like the easiest proxy would be to measure number of chats, maybe number of time, the amount of time spent on those things. But in reality, it's not really figuring out the actual value or the actual productivity that you gain from those things, right? This is not those are proxies of how are people using it, but you're not knowing how people are actually getting value from it. You can ask qualitative, you can always do qualitative surveys of hey, how do you like this? But it's never going to be really something that is truly a proxy of actually the productivity that you get, right? So the conclusion of this is that it's tough to measure ROI, which is a proper problem in this case. Now, it's better than nothing, right? But it's kind of tough to measure ROI. And also people are just generally lost. If you just provide licenses for everyone, it's better, I would say, that level 0, which is just, level 0, which is nothing. I'm going to put this down here. And the big problem that you have here that we've seen with companies is that basically people, which is a true problem, people use personal ChatGPT because they still want to use those tools for their work, but they don't use licenses. And so in that case, you get a bunch of issues that are possible in terms of GDPR. If you're in the EU, there is the AI Act, I believe. All those things get into real trouble real fast if you actually just don't provide anything. So better than nothing. Level 1 would be licenses. I would say level 2 here, which is still not going to be the great kind of approach here, but it's going to be training. And so I know this because, again, we work for companies as a freelance trainer. I provide training to people who are just starting off or starting to get some nice traction with using those tools. And so you basically going to have an approach of saying training for everyone or some people. And this is typically in companies where they want to say, for example, they could have a promise of saying anyone who wants to be trained on AI can actually get trained on that, or some departments specifically will be focused on to actually be trained, which is fine. what we see here is that, first of all, it's good because people they deconstruct their fear of using AI. So more people are using AI, which is great. But, and I would say the skill level and the skill difference is also reducing. So less differences in adoption and skill level. But you still have some issues, which we're going to be talking about here in a bit. And the issues, I would say, so I'm going to put those in green because those are good stuff. And this is going to be in blue. But the bad things, or the still challenging things, I would say, is it's still tough to measure ROI. And so I would say that in that case, you're providing training to people, and again, your only measure still is to maybe do some qualitative surveys, maybe try to ask people like how fast are you doing those things, but you don't really have like a good way to exactly know, okay, well, what is the impact truly of those training? So I would say it's still better than just providing licenses and just leaving it to people who are not doing it, but it's still not the whole thing, right? And we see this, and people, I think, and companies and executives are sometimes a bit frustrated because they're spending a lot of money first on the licenses and then also on the training without knowing exactly what they're getting out of it. It's still better, and we, as a trainer, I always think that training people is important, especially because you're guiding those people on this wave of generative AI. And it would be a mistake of just saying like, well, because it's not the most relevant thing, then I'm not going to be doing it. Like, training is still incredibly important, but it's not where you get the most value. The most value is at level 3. And so level 3 is something that essentially is specialized agents. I'm going to put this in purple. I want to show you a bit of a graph that I just did here before, where basically and this is something that we see with our customers who are onboarding Charlie, our AI agent, is that the value that they get with the investment and the money spent is, yes, it's a bit more investment to get agents, but actually you get the most value. And here you can see it's not like a linear thing. It's not like level 3 and having agents is a bit better. It's incredibly better, and for a lot of different reasons, which we're going to be covering now. So specialized agents are agents who utilize model, but they have specific knowledge. So they have specific knowledge. So we're going to try to cover like, what are they? You take an expert in your process in like a workflow. So you take a workflow, and could be something like report creation, analysis, something that takes time. You want to have something that is relevant in that case. So for example, time intensive, repetitive, something that those work, like if a workflow has this kind of structure, like having a workflow that is time intensive, like it takes a few hours, sometimes even days, it is repetitive, it has a lot of specific knowledge, then that's a good candidate for a workflow. This is what we've done with Charlie, our AI agent. Charlie is assisting an expert on creating a price quote. Normally a price quote for a trade show booth takes at least 3+ hours. Usually it's more than this. It's like a day, sometimes 2 days, sometimes you wait between going back and forth. And we've reduced this to like 15 minutes, 15. So this is like a specific workflow, and that requires specific knowledge about the process. And so this is something where you're going to have probably some workflow and some knowledge from an expert, and potentially specific to the company. So this is not specific knowledge that you can find anywhere out there on the internet. And so this is where you get really down to the nitty-gritty of it. This agent will walk you through, but always leave the expert the control. So it's always the expert has control. And of course, in that case, I'm talking about the user has control always, and plus the responsibility for the outputs. So this is something that we really think is important within our startup, is to say, the users of those agents have the control and they have the responsibility. It's not something like, well, Charlie did a mistake, like it's completely not my fault. This is something where you collaborate with the agent. This is not something where you just like leave it the responsibility completely. And this is not something where we replace the expert, because you always need that human oversight. But it does get you from a process of multiple hours down to a couple of minutes. Let's talk a bit about the bonuses here. So in our bonus, and I didn't mention this, but I should probably mention. So in our case, the experts and the expertise from the experts, so let me actually do this from expert, came from my co-founder who had 7 years of experience in this domain. And so the 7 years of experience actually were combined and collated into the instructions of our agent, Charlie. And so this is what we got. This is where the expertise is coming from. But it cannot be something where it's just expertise from, out there. It needs to be custom to your specific business. That's where you get the proper value. So let's talk about the benefits in this case, and the benefits will be in green. There are lots of benefits. I would say the most obvious one, of course, is time saving. So this is where you actually allow your experts to not spend time on things that are not valuable, to not spend time on non-valuable things. In our case, it's not that price quote creation is not valuable, but the process of creating the price quote is so cumbersome that you don't want to go through this, and you want to save them the time. In this case, the experts are usually the salespeople. You want your salespeople to be talking to actual people, not just sitting down trying to figure out how to create a price quote. That's not really where their time is being spent well. I would say also what you have is the retention of the knowledge. A lot of our customers had never really sat down and formalized their process of creating a price quote. In that case, this is the perfect opportunity to actually sit down, talk with the experts, and it doesn't need to be something that is too long, and actually share and formalize and write down the expertise or the process on how to create a price quote. Which is great, because if the expert is off on vacation or leaves the company, then at least you have this knowledge being retained somewhere within the instructions of Charlie, of your specialized agent. And your specialized agent then becomes this kind of library of knowledge. And the beautiful thing about this is that it's written out. The instructions are written out. So this is something that you, even as users, as humans, can actually read as well. So it's almost like the instructions of the specialized agent becomes a perfect library of standard operating procedures or like specific workflow documentation of your business. It is also much easier to then measure the ROI, because it's now a specific process. You can say agent assisted in, 155 workflows and saved, 1,000 hours, we'll say. And so this is something where you can much more easily, because you have this specific workflow with inputs and outputs, you can know that specifically this agent assisted and helped out a set number of users, a set number of workflows, a set number of hours. And this is just so much easier to then measure the ROI and say, okay, well, this is now worth my investments. This is not anecdotal evidence of just, well, my users are using ChatGPT to help them write emails, which is okay, but this is not where the true value is. I'll say also one of the great investments and the benefits is actually to have a user experience that is, I would say, agnostic or doesn't need to care about the digital nativeness of the users. Which basically means that even if you have someone who is not really used to using those models, they just need to know how to interact with someone else. You create a specialized agent in such a way that in reality, what you need to think about is how to communicate your needs. And so in our case with Charlie, there's less needs to know how to prompt properly, because we built it in a way that it is really hand-holdy. It holds the hand of the user. Now, you do need to know how to kind of communicate and make sure that you understand a few tips and tricks, but there's much less you need to provide a role to your model. You need to actually make sure that you verify the sources and whatnot. This is basically, we have baked into its instructions and into its personality, our agent, a lot more user experience quality of life, I would say, which makes all the difference, because then it means that regardless of if you have someone who's really digital native, who really knows how to use computers, technology and whatnot, and someone who is less, and we see it because some of our users who are, I would say, close to retirement, are loving actually talking and working with Charlie, because they don't need to understand like a big complex user interface. They just need to understand how to talk to, almost if they're talking to another human. And that makes it so much easier in that case. So I could go on a lot more time around how specialized agents are really the true value true way to get the value from AI. And really, I would say that just providing licenses and just a regular kind of, hey, I use ChatGPT to write my emails, that's fine, but it's almost like we're at the early stage of electricity and email writing is just lighting up the streets. It's valuable, not saying it's not valuable, but we're not thinking of the actual factory powering electricity, which is actually more of the agents. This is where you get really the power of truly AI and benefiting your business and also benefiting everyone in the company who's working on those processes, and saving time on processes that are not super valuable in themselves, and where it's not where their role and their quality and their skills really shines. So if you want to truly get the power of AI in your business and want to build such a specialized agent for one of your workflows, let's get in touch. All my info is in the description or somewhere around here, and I'll be happy to discuss with you your use case to see if we can help you out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.